My boss at Blue Grace walks into my office and he says, "Hey, I want to do a Spartan race and you're going to do it with me." And I looked up at him and I'm like, "No, like, fuck no, that sounds awful." An 8 to 10 mile trail run, I had no intention of making myself that uncomfortable. But I went home that night and I realized that I already was that uncomfortable. I was 2 years sober. I was dating a new girl that's my now wife. I was a VP of sales with almost 100 people working for me. We were crushing goals. I literally had everything going for me and I was stuck. And that's when I kind of had gone through and just realized that I think all these things that I had gone through had started to create this limiting mind about myself, that I couldn't really do things, that I couldn't run because of my diabetes. I couldn't adventure because of sleep apnea. I'd always be a piece of shit because of my alcoholism. Well, when I decided I needed a big challenge, just something to break up the mold.
Before we jump into today's episode, a quick word from our sponsors. Looking for a freight-specific CRM? Sales-CRM is built exclusively for freight brokers and freight agents. Manage shipper sales prospecting, track your carriers, and monitor the lanes they run, all in one powerful platform, and all for one extremely affordable price. Try Sales-free for 14 days with no credit card required. Visit sales-crm.com today. Operations teams, streamline your driver communications with VendorFlow. Their platform organizes all of your driver communications in one place, boosting satisfaction with faster response times, and no more juggling between multiple apps. Get a free consultation today to see if VendorFlow is right for you. Freight World, meet Purple Squirrel, the connector that links you with the top talent and winning opportunities. From inland transport to maritime freight forwarding, they deliver competitive commission splits and genuine support because they give a shit. Ready to earn more? Explore your options with Purple Squirrel. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to the Think Freight podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Wardine, and a warm welcome to Nick Klingensmith. Nick, welcome to the pod, man.
Tommy, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Dude, I'm so excited to chat with you. You've got such a cool story. We were just chatting a little bit, kind of, before we hit record, about how much you love to just drive and the overall, just like the actual driving aspect, right? Not just like the enjoying the trip, but like you enjoy actually driving, right?
Let me rephrase, because now that I live in Florida, it's the single worst thing I've ever done. And I mean, the people down here do not care if you live or die. So, and I know
that's how Houston is too.
Everyone wants to say they have the worst traffic in the world. And I don't think we have the worst traffic. I just think we have a homicidal driving force down here that makes it completely unenjoyable. That said, I think that's why I like the long trip. I like it when, you can just be on the road and actually experience your surroundings and not necessarily be fighting for your life. And that's why I like some of those longer drives. And it does put me back there. You're a less hurried pace. And I think it's one of the things I like about traveling now is a lot of these events and Spartan races are out in the middle of nowhere. So you've got a 2 to 4 hour drive from an airport. There's an experience everywhere you go.
What's funny is, you're from Massachusetts, right? From the Northeast. So, a lot of people say that those drivers are the worst. I've been over there. I've been in Texas. I've been in Chicago. I've been all over this country. Honestly, I still feel like both Florida and then like New Jersey drivers are some of the worst. What do you think?
If you are not from New England, I know why people would feel that way, because they're very aggressive drivers. However, the thing about New England drivers is they're one type of driver. So to an outsider, that might feel that way. But the problem in why Florida is the worst is it's every type of bad driver. It's a melting pot for bad drivers. They give away licenses here with like kids' birthday cakes. Like, it's the second most deadliest state to drive in the country. And yet they do not care. I'm passionate on this because it bothers me. I'm a Massachusetts driver who has turned into a defensive, I just don't want to die driver.
Man, that's how I've become. I'm from Chicago, but like I feel like we're very aggressive, but like also like we're all very aggressive, kind of very similar to like the Northeast. But like here in Houston, same way. It's like you have a melting pot of like slow bad drivers, fast bad drivers, overly aggressive drivers, people who just don't care, who are driving 190 miles an hour on their motorcycles.
Old,
Like you've
young,
exactly, you've got 95-year-olds that are still on the road that are driving
Uber
40.
drivers.
Exactly. You
Uber
got every
drivers.
kind of person out there. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, it's
So yeah,
I mean it's also it's a good microcosm for the transportation world out there too.
spot on, man. And diving into that, why don't you tell us kind of about your background? How did you get into the logistics world? And because it's kind of a little bit different than exactly what you're doing today, right? You're more of a motivational speaker now, but you're still in sales. So like, why don't you tell us about your background, how you got into the freight industry, and what kept you in it for so long?
Well, it's like this. They say it's Hotel California, you come in, but you can never leave. We cannot get
Yep.
out of this industry, and I've tried several times. So, 20 years ago, I moved down to Florida, and I started working for a small shipping franchise that was a DHL reseller as well as LTL and like the occasional truckload. We were a franchise-based system at the time, and I was the seventh employee of that company. A couple years later, that company became known as Blue Grace Logistics.
Mm,
And that's where I spent most of my career. I was one of the chief architects of the first decade of that company. I stayed there for about 14 years, was building the training department, the recruiting department, but most of my time was in sales. And what I really found is that my niche was in building teams. And so there came a point where there really wasn't a lot more for me to build there. We'd gotten a lot of the private equity. We were 500 million plus, 500 employees, offices in all the states. And they've continued to have an awesome ride, but there just wasn't, I needed new toys to tinker with. So I ended up consulting for about a year and a half where, again, I thought I was going to get out of the industry. And nope, my first client was Blue Grace. And then I started just getting some other clients within the space, doing some recruiting, creating some training, and again, building teams, which is really what I did through the pandemic until about 2021, where I was hired on with a company called Sheer Logistics in St. Louis.
yeah.
And similar to Blue Grace, only in a shorter amount of time, I was hired on there. I built them an office down here in St. Pete. And then about a year after that, they got private equity, began closing the remote offices, reallocating resources, and ultimately I was one of them. And so, but about 5 months before that, I was having lunch with an old friend of mine, actually an old lawyer from Blue Grace. And I was telling him, man, I got a story to tell. I want to tell it and I don't know how. And so he turned me on to a company where his old law school buddy was actually a founder, and they're speakers, coaches for entrepreneurs and so forth. And so I enrolled in the program and I figured, you know what, I'm going to start building this over the next year and a half or so, learning my craft, and then maybe I'll make an exit. Well, when Sheer called me that Wednesday afternoon in October, I guess I decided the time was then and announced to the world that, hey, guess what? I'm a motivational speaker. Obviously, the headline of my background is that I'm a 4-time cancer survivor. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I have 7 herniated discs from 2 different rollover fatality car accidents. I have sleep apnea, nerve damage. I almost died from meningitis. Terrorists once put a nerve gas bomb on my airplane. It's not relevant to the story, but it gets a little pause effect. And in the last 8 years, I've completed over 100 Spartan races, 6 major marathons, including Boston, Chicago, New York, and Berlin, about 100 other obstacle course races and Sufferfest. I've raised over $25,000 for charity in the process, and written 2 books. One is the story I just told you called Through the Fire. And the second, which is really bridges the gap of what I do now, is called Selling Inspired, which is not a sales book. It's a book for salespeople. It's a book on developing the mental endurance for a career in this crazy industry. And so that's what I do now is speak to sales teams and coach sales teams, and then prospect to speak and coach the sales teams.
Man, Nick, that was a lot. Why don't we break some of that down? Because I think there's a lot there that the audience may be interested in, and why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of that journey you had? Like you said 4-time cancer survivor, type 1 diabetic. How have these experiences like shaped your life and your career? Because a lot of people could sit here and say, "Hey, I'm in sales, I'm in logistics," but you're also a 4-time cancer survivor. type 1 diabetic. Those are massive things to overcome in and of themselves, but also to be in this industry that is so fast paced, that is so stressful. How did those experiences, shape some of those parts of your life and your career?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. There's two versions to this story, and that it is a
Yeah.
before and an after. I wasn't the way that I am now. I was not born this way. I had to go through it to get through it. And so when I was going through it, I was a victim.
Mm.
I was petty. I was blameful. I was stressed out. I was trying to control the uncontrollable. I was
Yeah.
fully indulgent of my alcoholism. I did not care that much about other people's feelings. I was selfish, and I was dreadfully afraid of not getting my way. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with just honestly as being an alcoholic. But the problem was all these things that I kept happening to me, it just emboldened me. I
Mm.
thought I was resilient and gritty, and people would tell you, oh, you're so tough and you overcome this. But what I realized now at the time is that I was just resentful and afraid. And so a lot of it that back then, it did help me. And this is where the thing about the victim mindset, and this is what it is, it's a victim mindset. Every time we go, it's me against the world, that's the rally cry of the victim mindset.
Mm.
We don't ever want to admit it. And sometimes the reason being is sometimes that helps us. I needed to pick a fight with cancer mentally. I literally had to mentally pick a fight with cancer so that I could get through it. The same thing with diabetes, the same thing with all the like ailments and illnesses and near-death experiences and self-imposed bullshit as well. All those things, I had to pick a fight with it. But every time something happened, it just gave me the excuse to behave the way that I was behaving. I justified my actions that way. So that's version 1. Version 2 is I'm grateful for all of it. And I mean that, all of it,
Yeah.
because now I have a purpose. And this is tangible. I have the ability to help other people simply by sharing about what I went through. And the way that I know that I'm the same way I have transitioned as a driver is the way that I have transitioned as a person now. I want to get home alive, and I want others to get home alive too. I'm not the most important person in the world anymore. And I look back too on a lot of the mindset shift. And if I had applied it to, say, different parts of my career, I wonder if I would have been more successful. To be honest, I don't think so, at least not incredibly. But here's where it would have made a major difference. I would have been significantly happier, and I would have been significantly a better leader for other people. And it probably would have made a difference in their lives.
Yeah.
I know
Let
I
me
started
ask you.
off on a tangent there.
No, I love that. It's tough for, a lot of people say, hey, you have to make a mindset shift. You have to change your mindset. But a lot of people maybe don't know what that means or how they can make that mindset shift. What are some of those ways that, you took those experiences that you've had, and how did you make that shift to run over, you said it was over 100 Spartan races you've done?
Yep.
Yeah. How did you channel that to be able to shift your mindset to be able to do those kind of things?
This is when I'm very lucky because I get to talk about this, because for me, it was dumb luck.
Mm.
My boss at Blue Grace walks into my office and he says, hey, I want to do a Spartan race and you're going to do it with me. And I looked up at him and I'm like, no, like, fuck no, that sounds awful. An 8 to 10 mile trail run, I had no intention of making myself that uncomfortable. But I went home that night and I realized that I already was that uncomfortable. I was 2 years sober. I was dating a new girl that's my now wife. I was a VP of sales with almost 100 people working for me. We were crushing goals. I literally had everything going for me, and I was stuck. And that's when I kind of had gone through and just realized that I think all these things that I had gone through had started to create this limiting mind about myself, that I couldn't really do things, that I couldn't run because of my diabetes. I couldn't adventure because of sleep apnea. I'd always be a piece of shit because of my alcoholism. Well, when I decided I needed a big challenge, just something to break up the mold. I wanted to get back in the gym. I wanted to start getting active again, and I needed a kickstart. I figure the race is 9 weeks away. I'll run, I'll strength train. That's just enough time for me to focus on doing this one thing. And then hopefully hopefully I'll get the feeling back and the buzz back, and those 9 weeks will create good habits. And then I'll start going to the gym again and just whatever, live an everyday life. Well, it succeeded wildly. Because when I crossed the finish line that day, I defied everything that I previously believed about myself. There was nothing
Yeah.
holding me back. It was like being a little kid playing out in the woods, just completely with no fear and no doubt. And so when I jumped the fire, I wanted more. And it just became a lifestyle. But that's how we begin to get out of that is you just have to you have to defy something you have to defy your own belief. Set a big goal, take a big action. We need a disruption.
Yeah. You took that big challenge and turned it into literally a life-changing event. Now, a lot of people may have heard of Spartan races. Can you elaborate what they are, what they entail, kind of the different Spartan races that there are, and kind of some of the ones that you've done and kind of found the most challenge in?
Yeah. Spartan race, there are many obstacle course racing and endurance brands. I race in a lot of them, but I talk about Spartan a lot because that's where my story begins.
Yeah.
A Spartan race is an obstacle course race. It's a trail run, like a mud run, but with obstacles, and it's longer, tougher, variety of obstacles that challenge your strength, your endurance, your speed, but most of all, your resilience. Distances are anywhere from like 5K up to 50K. And obstacles include climbing over walls, climbing under barbed wire, carrying sandbags, buckets of rocks, swinging from various monkey bars and climbing up ropes. But one of the things that I love about Spartan better than the other brands, the Spartan obstacles are the same almost every race. So the idea about Spartan is competition. You start to get a barometer for how you did. And then if you keep doing the same stuff, you can see if you improve. That's what I like Spartan about the most. Another race brand is called Savage Race, where is a lot more unique in modifying of their obstacles. I've never technically done the same race twice when I've done Savage.
That's cool.
Yeah, I like that one about them. But one thing that Spartan does better than anyone else is they use the terrain. In some of these events, depending on where they are, like I've done some of these obstacles. I mean, some of these races that were the toughest races I've done, and they didn't even need obstacles to be that way. They will dredge out a bunch of stuff to make things like even more uncomfortable. If they find a slipperier or steeper or rockier or stupider area, they're going to make sure they run you through that. And I mentioned earlier how all the limiting beliefs about myself. And honestly, even now I'm a house cat. All right. Like I've never been the outdoors guy. And for me, I get those couple hours of just freedom. And it's like controlled adversity because I still know I'm getting my comfy bed and a hot shower and some Netflix later, but I get to be out there. And I'll tell you what, in the midst of some crazy suffering, I actually ran a master class. That's not even relevant, but there's a picture I took. That's actually not even true. I did a race in Killington, Vermont in September. It's a mountain. It's about 3,500 feet, I think, to the peak. You run up and down it a whole bunch of times, but we started at sunrise, before sunrise. And there's a picture that this guy took and I posted it and I kind of stole it as my own. And we're on top of the clouds and you can just see it for days. And it's the most majestic thing I'd ever seen. I DNF'd that race, but I got to be on the mountain for that sunrise.
Mm. That's pretty epic, right?
Like that's it. That's where, I'm going to go to Jacksonville this weekend to do the Spartan Super and Sprint, which is the 10K and the 5K. It's an okay course. It's like on farmland. It's whatever. But climbing a mountain, that's pretty fun. Like that's pretty unique.
It is. It's not always something you do every day, right? Like you said, you're normally running farmland or these different kind of obstacles, but like that's a different kind of like run. That's a different atmosphere.
And I'll tell you what, it's the hardest race in the country for obstacle course racing. It's the highest DNF rate out of all of it. Like maybe 20 to 30 or 30 to 40% of the people even finish the race.
Wow.
And so I'm a middle of the packer to begin with. And so I failed it 3 times now. Once this year because I got cramps. You can't really call it an injury, but I was unable to move on. But with that time crunch, the thing about this event and what I like about it is knowing the statistics of what I just told you. And I live in Florida. So for me, mountain climbing and training means getting on my treadmill with a sandbag or going to the side of a highway and going up and down before the cops tell me to leave and, just doing 1,000 squats. But I had to have a conversation with myself going into this race. And I had to tell myself that the strategy, the only way that I would be able to succeed is if I suffered, if I was miserable, that if I was begging for it to stop. And I don't usually get this way. Like, that's not how I like to spend my life. I train a lot so I can race and not hate it. You know what I mean? Like, but in order for me to even finish this race, I had to lean into hell. And even though I failed that race that day, I achieved my race strategy because as miserable as I was, I mean, I'm grinding, just powering into the earth to try to climb up this mountain, right? And I loved it because I knew I could, because I pushed myself, because I challenged myself, because I stood up, right? Yeah. I wasn't a house cat. I wasn't the guy who was afraid of things. I leaned into just misery. And that's another way. You talk about the chaos, right? Of like being in logistics, and not even just on a broker floor. A career in this industry means you're going to change jobs 10 to 25 times now. And like, it's hard to keep up. And with the new technology and God forbid, like the, social media and negative influences and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
We need a bigger splash. We need something that drives your focus away, something that's more important, because, when I'm focusing on that one thing, everything else gets quieter. Mm. Focus on something more important and all the noise goes away.
It really, to tap on that point, when you're able to just push everything out of your mind, it honestly creates so much more focus on those objectives that you're trying to do, like whether it's in freight or whatever it is. If you start running marathons, or you just start running and start working out, or start just pushing that noise out of your brain and start focusing on one other thing, even if it's for, an hour a day, 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, it's going to make you so much more clear on every aspect of your life.
I've really come to believe just in the power of intention.
Yeah.
And last October, well, it was actually before last October, I was approached by my contact at the American Cancer Society, who I had spoken at earlier that year. And she was asking me to be an ambassador for Men Wear Pink, the campaign to fundraise against breast cancer. And I had to tell her, I'm like, I don't know if I can right now. To be honest, I bootstrapping my business here. We're selling our house. Like we're chasing bankruptcy,
right.
Like I kind of need to be singular focus here. And I hated that, but sometimes you have to stay alive, or you got to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Absolutely.
But later that day, I received a call from a friend of mine, somebody I knew 30 years ago. Okay. And he starts telling me that he's sick, and neither one of us wanted to say the word, but his diagnosis was bad. And I hated that there was nothing I could do, nothing. Yeah. And so I realized just because I couldn't do something for him doesn't mean I couldn't do something. And it was really hard. And so, but I also came to realize that sometimes, and I wrote about this morning, I actually made 2 posts today on in the last couple of days on LinkedIn about that survivor mode, that survivor mentality, because sometimes we get into that because we're surviving, we're fighting for the next check, we're fighting for the next load.
Yeah.
If we don't do something to disrupt that, you're going to stay there forever. And I realized maybe I just needed a reminder that some things are more important. And so I called her back. I said yes and began campaigning my ass off. And I'll tell you what, if my business hurt from it, I doubt it. Did I maybe miss a couple of calls with somebody, who knows? But how important is that into that bigger picture? And more fulfilling life gives you more reasons and fulfillment to live your life.
Spot on. Nick, I want to ask, so, not everyone who's gone through kind of what you've gone through, right, decides I'm going to go write a couple of books. I'm going to go out there. You could have been a motivational speaker. You could go on podcasts like mine. You could have continued on in logistics and gone and, help build teams there. Why write 2 books and why start your own business?
I've always liked to write. I wrote my first book when I was in the 1st grade.
What was it about?
It was probably about ninjas or superheroes or superhero
That's
ninjas,
awesome.
But the
superhero ninjas, we're going with that one.
Exactly. I remember we had like writing class in the 1st grade, for an hour, half hour, 10 minutes, whatever, who knows. And I go to turn in my thing, and the teacher gives me like a bad grade. And I'm like, what the hell? And she was like, you can't start a sentence, a page with the word and. And I was like, I didn't. And I marched back to my desk and I got the pages from the days before. And I was like, she's like, oh, because everyone just writes one page. I was writing a goddamn book. So
Right.
I just always enjoyed writing. I was that kid who had a notebook with me everywhere I went. So I've actually used to write a lot of fiction. I did try to get a few things from representation. They weren't that good. We'll never let them see the light of day. And as I just started to have this story, 2017, 2018, here's the thing, two versions. People always used to tell me, oh, you should write a book, just because I'd been through a lot of shit. Just because you've had bad luck don't make you special.
Mm.
That was version one. But that as I started being able to do something with it and transform and tell other people about it, just got in my ear. And so where it really was, the first one, Through the Fire, was mostly just journaling for a long time. I didn't know if anyone would ever see the light of day.
Yeah.
I wrote very personally and deeply about like the personal development and my history and things that I went through and the emotional aspects. I mean, it was actually like, it was emotionally challenging. It was probably where my transformation truly went through, was when I was writing that book, because the second iteration and cut and revising and you have to start taking out the bullshit. And when you decide that you're going to publish this thing, you have to realize you're either going to dramatize the hell out of it or make it completely raw. You can't do anything in between. And this just is not that exciting of a book, even dramatized, unless it is about superhero ninja obstacle course racers. So I just had to get completely raw and honest. And that's when I put it out there. I figured, honestly, there was a message that maybe someone out there would need to hear. Maybe they would find it. And it turns out that a lot of people found it, a lot of people needed it, and a lot of people told me about it. And that's really where after I put it out there in 21, that I knew I had something more to do. It wasn't just that I'd gone through something. It was now that I have something that I can do something with and help others with.
With the two books you've written, Through the Fire and Selling Inspired, what are some of those like key strategies or even like mindsets that you maybe share in your keynote speeches or like some of those coaching sessions? You don't have to give away the whole sauce, but like, to help people overcome like adversity in sales, but also especially in logistics.
Both books ultimately really do come down to a mindset shift from victim to thriving. And what I deliver, whether it be in coaching or even in speaking, is a transformation. It's a journey from accepting that we have ownership over our mindset, taking personal responsibility for the things in our life, letting go of the past, letting go of things that hold us back, setting really big, epic, challenging goals that challenge us, that cause us to refocus, to aspire for something greater. And throughout that process, it's about self-reflection and letting go of excuses and moving beyond our fears and ratcheting up self-belief. I have a practice where when I do bring on new coaching clients, I have them do this exercise that I copped from Franklin Covey a couple hundred years ago. But I have them do like a kind of a vision mapping of of what they would want from their life.
Right.
Not once have I not had to send them back to the drawing board for not dreaming big enough. Too often. I mean, and I just want to look at myself here, because 8 years ago, my aspirations were to do what I was doing. And since I had hit that mountaintop, I would never be happy with it.
Yeah.
I would need to move up to a C-level job, which I'm not really that guy. So, and if I was, I'd be moving careers every 18 months, like in that space or something to that effect. So that wasn't going to be for me. I said yes to something that disrupted my life. It dramatically changed my life. I would have no idea that I would have written 2 best-selling books, that I'd be a professional speaker, that I'd be standing here talking to you today. Sometimes we just got to say yes to something new, and for no other reason at all, to believe that there is something more for us out there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good message, because, again, when you own what's going on in your life and you can control, like we started, when you can control the controllables, it opens up something completely different in what you're doing.
The biggest thing, and I can't even believe I neglected this part, is why are you doing it?
Yeah.
What is, excuse me, your purpose? And it is not cliche. I'm the luckiest guy in the world because when I was riding through the fire, I discovered my purpose. Overcome every obstacle and inspire others they can too. I
Yeah.
looked at everything I'd gone through and I'm like, man, life keeps happening. It's probably going to keep happening.
Yep.
This is my path. This is what I'm here for. They keep coming up. I keep knocking them down. This is what I do now. It really was like an acceptance of,
Yeah.
but I don't know if most people get that lucky. And so maybe we just need to find and understand our purpose for right now. I'll give you an example of something because sometimes I'll talk to people who will come to me for some work motivation and I'll be like, well, let me ask you, what's your why? What's your purpose? And they'll take out a picture of their kids or something. And I'm like, stop, put that away. They're like, why? I'm like, you're lying. And they get all mad, which I do on purpose. Because if that was true, you wouldn't be on the phone with me. They
Yeah.
were the purpose and the drive. But I'm like, look, they're 6 and 7 now. They talk and have desires of their own. So things in your mind begin to shift. We need a new higher purpose. And one of the other areas I think a lot of people, especially because this industry can be really good for developing talent.
Yes.
Like absolutely kid out of school, gets recognized for unique talent. 6 years later, he's running half the country, or doing something unique or building the next thing. I think this is a
Yep.
remarkable industry for that. And just look at the spin up of industries within the industry to say that, right? Look at all the media just in the industry.
Yep.
So, anyways, that said, we then tend to make our work our identity.
Mhm.
As much as I loved Blue Grace and left on very good terms, on January 31st of 2019, I woke up and I didn't know who I was. And it was like a panic attack because I didn't see it coming. And I'm like, whoa, who am I if I'm not like Bobby's guy? Who am I if I'm not like the BGVP? Like, wow. And it took a minute to kind of like even figure that out. I didn't know what was happening. And
Right.
now what I've been able to do is you understand if my purpose is ultimately to overcome obstacles and help other people, if my purpose is to help others with sales, help others succeed, just help others win, help others enjoy the day. Well, what better way to do it when working in logistics? It's a full-time job of helping people. And so even though it wasn't speaking and coaching, it checked those boxes because for me, I then realized my job at Sheer was not my purpose. My job at
Mm.
Sheer supported my purpose. And because
Yep.
it supported my purpose, it became part of my purpose. And even though it wasn't like something I wanted to sink my teeth into anymore for the rest of my life, I was still able to hit it with that same fervor. You don't live and die with every transaction when you know you're doing something for something bigger.
To that point, a lot of people, especially in the logistics industry, we hear this a lot. There's so much going on. There's so many different challenges. The industry evolves rapidly. We were talking about that earlier. What do you see as, maybe the advice or even some of the biggest challenges for freight professionals in sales, especially right now, to both gain market share, but also to like maintain that high level of performance, while constantly being rejected by their shippers?
I like, and I talk about this in the book, efforts over outcomes. I talk about math over emotion, process over people. If you live and die for transactions, you're going to die young. If you're someone
Yeah.
who's teetering on an addiction, that addiction is going to take over. We joke about the bad habits that brokers have, bad healthy habits, but some of those become lifestyles and
They
some of it
do.
can be avoided.
Yeah.
I'm a very passionate guy. If anybody who used to work with me is listening right now and hear me say, take your emotion out of it, they'd be like, that's not Nick. Like that's a direct signal. Um, but but that's why I was a very good boss and a very bad boss because my emotion would get the better of me and it comes at a cost.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, it's exciting when you're just feeling that, but at the end of the day, sales is about numbers. That's it. Numbers. And by the way, the customer who loves you, their business is about numbers too. It's about numbers. How much they like us, don't like us, interact, trust us, those things help us to impact numbers. But at the end of the day, all this stuff exists on a spreadsheet somewhere. And the more we accept that, the less of our mental stamina, our energy, and our soul, and our fun, and our life force, and whatever else you want to call it, that it takes away, right? When you know statistically that a truck is going to fail X one out of X amount of times, and it's going to happen that way. Once you start accepting that, okay, well, it happened. You don't have to live and die by every truck. When you understand, and I love using this reference that as a salesperson, if you were to fail 7 out of 10 times in the major leagues, you'd be in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Well, instead of resisting having to make a lot of calls and just hoping for that one gem that no other brokers ever talk to, why don't we just rely on the numbers and realize, hey, I only need 3 of these to work or 2 of these to work. People say they don't like process. Oh my God, blah, blah, blah. But, I like hearing Chris Jolly talk about things as an entrepreneur. And one of the things he talks about is his routine being as boring as possible.
Yep.
These are the parts of the job you don't like. Why do you want to be present? Like you want to be able to do this on Ativan, make this as stupid and simple and easy as possible. So that way you only have to be fully present for the things that require your attention to problem solve or the parts of the job you enjoy. But that's also how we just get in it for the long haul. And this is one piece for sure. I want anybody younger, network your ass off. That is lost on this young generation. And the fact is, someone who worked at a company for 14 years, those days are not going to be here for most of you for a while. So if you're going to have a successful career in this business, you're going to change logos every 2 to 3 years at least. And you're not going to have a job of upward mobility by doing it, submitting applications. If you don't know the 5 people that you would hire in your next job or the 5 people that you would call if you got fired today, you don't have a network. And that needs to be number one.
It's funny that you bring that up because you and I opened our conversation off camera talking about networking, talking about manifest and kind of the overall bigger picture of networking, kind of how that opens doors. And we're kind of ending or getting towards the end of our conversation with the exact same way because it is so important, right? Without networks, without both of our networks, you and I wouldn't be sitting here having this podcast conversation today, and nor would our audience be listening to this conversation without our networks, right? They're so important. And, like you said, there's not as much maybe quote unquote stability in the overall, market of employment, right? You have to be able to, it's not the same way, like you said, you're not going to have jobs 10, 15, 20 years anymore. It's going to be every 2 years, every 3 years, every 5 years, you're going to be looking for something different, or the company is going to likely get rid of a lot of people just through layoffs and just kind of, those natural things things that happen throughout business. There's always,
not all these are bad things.
No, exactly. They're not always bad things. They can be acquisitions. They can be market changes. They can be there's a lot of reasons why, companies change and evolve, and why, the person may want to change and evolve. It doesn't always have to be those bad things, right? It can be, hey, I just have outgrown this position and I'm ready to move on. And it's just, there's no upward mobility at the current job I have. So there's always those kind of events that trigger that. And it's kind of good knowing that going forward,
Yeah. Though it is that market, the flip side of that is there, just to reiterate how much opportunity there is. It's crazy that, honestly, because I did so much hiring over the years that I would have, the amount of talent that I saw that I didn't have a home for because a lot of these positions and needs didn't quite exist yet. And now, they're staples in everyday channels within companies and opportunity. And again, with chaos comes opportunity. So it's definitely a gift and a curse. And no matter what, if you can't handle blank space and chaos, this is probably not the industry for you. But there are ways to mitigate that.
Oh yeah, and what's funny is even if this may not be the right space, talking brokerages and things like that, there's so many places in logistics where you could potentially find a home, find a space.
I'm trying to make one right now. The motivational speaking coach will come up with a cooler thing for it. But, like I said earlier, man, you can't get out. It's where I spend all my time.
What's one thing, Nick, you want to leave with the audience that we haven't touched on yet? Whether that's, from the mindset perspective, the sales perspective, whatever you think is important.
God, what is the lesson of the day?
Lesson of the day. I love it.
Yeah, I'll tell you. It's about setbacks, and this is a perfect time of year for it because a lot of us want to set out hot or let me even talk to the powers that be in companies right now, because this is that time of year where you realize your Q1 forecast overshot the moon. And this is the time where we tend to get doubtful and we start writing things off. Oh, we're not going to achieve this. We're not going to achieve that. It's way too early for that. Sometimes we got to adjust our sails, but if you're going to set a big goal and a long-term goal, patience is the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
Right now, whether it be my financial goals, I have very lofty financial goals on a pipeline I have no idea where it's coming from yet. So there's going to be a lot of patience in there too. But even when, physical training and stuff like that, when facing an injury, my goal hasn't changed just because the process has to a little bit. So be unwavering in going after what you want to achieve and be wildly flexible in how you get there. But do not stop. Every single moment of every single day, there is an opportunity that we can do something that gets us closer to our goals. So don't write it off yet. And most of all, remember this: you work for you, not for them. Slacking off only hurts you, and excuses don't pay bills.
Nick, I love it. That's a great way to end this great word of the day, great, motivation of the day. I appreciate you coming on the show, Nick. We need to have you back on and to share more of, not just your story, but also some sales and things like that. We'll definitely have you back on maybe towards the middle half of the year. Where can listeners, connect with you, or if they want to learn more about Stride Motivation, where can they find you guys at?
I am everywhere on the internet at Stride Motivation. That's every social media platform, and the website is stridemotivation.com. Love to have you book a call. Get to know each other.
Absolutely. Make sure you guys check out Nick. His links will be down in the comments. And if you like today's podcast, make sure you give it a like and review. That does help us out a ton. And don't forget, we do drop 3 weekly newsletters, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at thinkfreight.io. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode. And don't forget to think freight.